The eviction notice came taped to the front door just after sunrise. It fluttered slightly in the cool morning air, the edges peeling where cheap glue failed to hold against the weather. Inside the modest brick townhouse, Harold and Evelyn Carter sat quietly at their kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs of untouched coffee. They had lived in that home for 12 years. 12 years of early mornings, Sunday dinners, family photos lining the hallway, and neighbors who waved as Harold swept the sidewalk every Saturday like clockwork. Now, according to the paper on the door, they had 7 days to leave. No violation listed, Evelyn whispered, reading the notice again. Her voice shook despite her effort to stay calm. No late payments, no explanation. Harold adjusted his glasses and stared at the document as if it might change if he looked long enough. They don't need a reason, he finally said. Not the kind they're willing to write down. They both knew what it meant. The property had recently been purchased by a new landlord, Richard Hensley, a man who had never introduced himself, a man who raised the rent on 3 black families within months, a man who had already pushed 2 families out using renovations that never happened. This time, it was their turn. When Harold called the landlord's office, the conversation was short. "You're being evicted legally," the assistant said flatly. "For what reason?" Harold asked. A pause. "Owner's discretion." Evelyn took the phone next. "We've paid every month early." Another pause, longer this time. "Sir Hensley feels the unit is no longer a good fit." "What does that mean?" Evelyn pressed. The line clicked, and then Richard Hensley himself came on. "You people should be grateful you stayed this long," he said casually. "Property values are changing. I'm making upgrades." "Upgrades for who?" Evelyn asked quietly. Silence then. "You have 7 days." The call ended. What the landlord didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was who the Carters were. Harold Carter had been a civil engineer for the state for over 30 years. He helped design bridges that still carried thousands of cars daily. Evelyn Carter had spent her life teaching history at an inner-city public school, refusing to retire until every student she taught could read and write confidently. And their son, Marcus Carter, was a federal judge. They didn't call him right away. They didn't want to worry him. They tried to handle it quietly. But the court date came faster than expected. The courtroom buzzed with low conversation. Landlord-tenant cases moved quickly here. 5 minutes per case, no emotion, no mercy. Richard Hensley sat confidently at the plaintiff's table in a tailored gray suit, flipping through papers like a man checking off items on a grocery list. He had done this before. Across the aisle, Harold and Evelyn sat side by side, dressed neatly but simply. Harold wore his church suit. Evelyn clutched her purse like armor. Neither spoke. They had no lawyer. The clerk called the case. Hensley Properties versus Carter. Richard stood first, already smiling. Then the judge entered. The entire room rose. Judge Marcus Carter took his seat behind the bench, adjusting his robe as the room settled. He glanced down at the docket, then he froze. His eyes lifted slowly. Across the room, his mother sat straight-backed, her face calm but tired. Next to her, his father's hands were folded tightly together, knuckles pale. For a moment, the courtroom disappeared. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had known they were dealing with housing trouble, but not this. Not like this. Not here. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Hensley," he said evenly, "please explain the basis for this eviction." Richard stepped forward, confident. "Your Honor, this is a standard no-cause eviction. My client owns the property and has chosen to reclaim it for future use." "Future use?" Marcus asked. "Please clarify." "Renovations," Richard replied quickly. "Major renovations." Marcus nodded slowly. "And you've provided written notice?" "Yes, and relocation assistance." "That's not required." Marcus leaned back slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "do you dispute the landlord's claims?" Evelyn stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we've never been late. Never caused trouble. We asked what renovations were planned." No answer. Harold added quietly, "2 other families were told the same thing. The apartments are still empty." Marcus's jaw tightened. Marcus turned back to Richard. "Mr. Hensley, are you aware of any protected class implications in this case?" Richard shrugged. "Race has nothing to do with it." Marcus paused, and spoke slowly. "Then you won't mind explaining why every tenant you've removed this year shares the same racial background?" The room went silent. A bead of sweat rolled down Richard's temple. "That's coincidental," he stammered. Marcus removed his glasses. "Mr. Hensley," he said, his voice firm now, "I need you to look at the defendants." Richard turned reluctantly. Marcus continued, "Do you recognize them?" "No," Richard said. Marcus nodded. "That's unfortunate." He stood. "For the record," Marcus said, voice steady but shaking beneath the surface, "the defendants are my parents." Gasps echoed through the gallery. Someone dropped a pen. Richard's face drained of color. Your Honor, I had no idea. Marcus raised a hand. This court will now address the legality of your actions, not your ignorance. He turned to the clerk. Enter into record, potential discriminatory eviction, bad faith notice, and retaliatory conduct. Richard's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. Marcus wasn't done. Additionally, he continued, this court is referring this matter to the State Housing Authority and Civil Rights Division for investigation. Richard's knees buckled slightly. Marcus recused himself immediately, as required by law, but the damage was done. Another judge reviewed the evidence. Emails surfaced. Patterns emerged. Witnesses testified. 2 former tenants came forward. The eviction was denied. The Carters were allowed to stay. But more than that, Hensley Properties was fined heavily. Their rental license was suspended, and a class action lawsuit followed. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn hugged her son tightly. You didn't have to say anything, she whispered. Marcus smiled softly. I didn't, he said. The truth spoke for itself. Harold placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Justice looks good on you. Marcus looked back at the courthouse doors. Justice, he said, should look like this for everyone.